Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be here. Um, I had a subject on my mind that I'm not sure if I ever made a message about this. I don't remember if I have or not. Um, God got to use just about any and everybody in the Bible. He used all different kinds of people to accomplish his mission, his goal. I was reading in a continuation of Hebrews chapter 11, and it mentions in verse number 31 about the woman named Rahab. Now, we always hear the story about her being a harlot. And I looked up that word, and it actually had quite a bit to tell. And I'm not one that gets into a whole lot of history about somebody. God allowed Rahab to be used in Scripture. And I think basically it's a picture of how God uses people today. I mean, it could very well be that people in general can be used of God. There's a verse here in Hebrews 11 that mentions her name. And I was reading over chapter 11 and I couldn't find it till I finally came up on it in verse 31. It says, by faith, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. Well, I went over there and I read, you see the full story over in Joshua chapter number 2, I believe it is. And the whole thing has to do with the harlot Rahab, all of the ins and outs of this woman named Rahab. One of the things that we see that is evident is that she had faith. I believe it was in Joshua chapter 2 that it even mentioned that she believed in the God. God had a plan to use her, and I believe that Rahab had a certain amount of faith. Now, some people's going to go and say, well, now, Brother Ken, Rahab was a harlot. Well, sometimes a harlot back in that day, of what I read, was someone that had different type of religion. That's not to say that she didn't have relations with people. Remember, there was the two men that went to Rahab's house, and everything was on the up and up. She wasn't trying to do any harm or get any benefit sexually from these two men of God, because, she had already heard of a lot of the things that had went on about the Lord opening up the sea to allow people to cross on dry land. I mean, the Bible declares that Rahab wasn't dumb. Rahab was very brave. She kept the spies up there on the roof and basically lied to the men that was trying to hunt for them. And she made a way for them to be protected. So evidently, she must have been fairly brave to store up men up on the roof to keep them safe until the coast was clear. So, not only that, but when you read Joshua chapter 2, you see where she was very smart. She wanted them men to protect her family, her mom and dad, her own family, her own, you know. Some people might sound like, well, Rahab was trying to bargain with God. No, I don't get that. I don't get that Rahab was trying to bargain with God. I think it was in the Lord's will that Rahab be used of God. Rahab was someone that no doubt was, in time, she was going to be very important, highly important. This woman, Rahab, was bold. I mean, really, if you think about it and all that she did and how that she stood up for her blessing, that she wanted her family to be protected. I mean, she didn't really know them two men. I mean, she heard that God's favor was on the children of Israel, so therefore these two men was sent to her place, and it just so happened that Rahab's house was right along the edge of the city wall, the wall of Jericho, I believe it is called, to the point that she was able to pull them up to safety by a scarlet robe or a scarlet ribbon. I think the Bible calls it a thread, but I think that we know that the thread must have been fairly big because it had to be tough enough to lift up them men up to safety. And you had to be willing to see it from a distance because that scarlet thread was going to be a visual for later on. And we might maybe get into that in just a minute. I believe the story proves in Joshua chapter 2 that she was considerate. She was considering her own life and her own family and her own love of her family to protect them so that when God would come and destroy the town, that Rahab wanted protection. And God was going to show her protection. We see in Joshua chapter 2 where Rahab was pleasing to God. God used her and found favor in her. She was ready to help. When them men got there and they needed help, she lifted them up, protected them, probably fed them, cared for them, hid them, lied for them, Oh, Brother Ken, you can't say that. That you mean God used a liar? Oh, yeah. Because the fib that she told was to protect the two men that was up on top of the roof. God had a reason to do what he did in order for, Rahab to be pleasing to God. Not only was she ready to help, she was willing to help. Ready to help is one thing. Willing to help is a whole nother story. As soon as the men from the town had went out to try to hunt for them, she had basically said that they had got gone, and if you hurry and catch them, you can catch them. And as far as I remember, this lady Rahab told them men what they had to do. She set the ground rules. But here's the thing. In Joshua 2, them two men of God that came there agreed with everything she said. I want my family protected. I want you to, when you leave here, to go to the mountain, stay 3 days until the coast is clear. I want you to go back, and I want you to tell Joshua that of our agreement. And them two men said, if you are willing to obey and do what you say, you won't have no problem. So it was sort of a meeting of the mind. They had a meeting of the mind that Rahab said what she would do, and the men agreed to that and held her to that. But here's the main thing, and maybe people might not realize it, but I don't know if I can turn to it. But I found something that was sort of strange, and maybe some people might not really know that it's here. Would you believe that Rahab was in the family tree? Would you believe that Rahab was actually in the family tree of Jesus? If you want to look in Matthew chapter 1 and verse 5, and Solomon begat Boaz of Rachab, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse. And then if you go on down, you'll see where it mentions David. So what am I trying to say here? I'm saying that this woman right here, if I hadn't have done went and turned my place and where I was in the book of Hebrews, and I'll see if I can find it again. I shouldn't do that because I don't ever know where I'm going to go. And sometimes I close up the Bible too quickly, but I'm right here at it right now. Hebrews 11. I just noticed something that is spelled a little bit differently in Matthew chapter 5 or Matthew 1 and verse 5 than it does over here in verse number 31 of Hebrews of chapter 11. But the family tree was important. The family tree was important. Bottom line, here's the bottom line. God can use anybody he wants to, no matter what kind of past they have. God can use anyone he chooses to. He can raise up anyone to speak the gospel. I ain't smart. I'd be the first one to admit that I'm not nothing fancy. I mean, people can realize that I just come out here and do my best. And that's really all I know to do. But here's what I'm trying to get at. God saw Rahab and what she was able to give. And God sees what I'm able to give. And he's also able to see what you're able to give. He knows what you're willing to give and what you're not able to give. And when the enemy came, or to them, it was the enemy, they marched around them walls, and the Bible says that the walls fell, but Rahab's house was protected. It stayed in place, all because of the agreement that she had with them two spies. And God honored their agreement because she kept her end of the bargain, and them two spies kept their end of the bargain. So here's the thing. Can God get what he wants today in 2022? As long as it's his deal, as long as the deal is God's will, then God can use whoever he wants. He used Saul. Look at what Saul did. Remember what Saul did? Oh, he was a bad man. He killed Stephen. He had Stephen killed. But on that road to Damascus, God got his attention. And when God got his attention, guess what happened? Even old Saul said, Lord, what would you have me do? He had a life-changing experience. And you know what? It could have very well been that, see, this woman here in verse 31 was added to the chapter of Hebrews, chapter 11. Sure was. Can God use you? Maybe you might feel like you sort of a harlot. But you know what? God can change anybody. He can change anybody if he wants to. He loves everybody. God's love doesn't matter if you're a harlot or not. God's love is God's love. And all he's wanting to do today is change you and change me. When I came out here tonight, I had no idea I was going to talk on Rahab the harlot. I had no clue. I just said, Lord, let me just speak for you. Speak for you. Elderly Ministry is YouTube. You can get me on YouTube. If you want to go to the website is elderlyministry.com. If you need to talk, be glad to talk with you. Just give me a buzz. There's a cell number there. There's email. You can use either one. Be glad to talk with you. If I can help you with anything, by all means, look me up. All right. Thank y'all for tuning in.